with the man, the legend, Carl Shaw. How you doing, Carl? You doing okay, man?
Hi, Jamar. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
I am doing I'm doing fine. I'm doing better that you're joining me, and I'm happy that you're joining me. You are the person I wanted to talk to today. In fact, I thought to myself, I was like, I wonder if Carl can talk about this. So thank you for joining me. I'm glad that you're here. And just so the audience will know, Carl Jha, he is my glasses. Carl Jha is host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In. And of course, subscribe and support his podcast at patreon.com/silk and steel. Carl, I named this China Changes the World or Shook the World or something like that. The reason I named it that is because under normal circumstances, you get the United States saying, we're going to apply sanctions. And the country that they say that to wither, beg, beseech the king, God, Emperor Trump for sanction relief. China didn't do that. When Trump came out and said, well, we're putting sanctions on Chinese link or Chinese companies that are getting Russian oil, China's response to this was effectively to pass sanctions of their own. It's China's response, a formal legal order declaring those sanctions null and void inside China and prohibiting Chinese companies from acting on those sanctions. Break this down for us. What's going on with this? And why is
Yeah.
this? Or do you think I'm right that this changes the world? Give me your thoughts.
So I saw a ridiculous Bloomberg headline just before coming to your show, and the headline says, China's defiance against U.S. sanction triggers confrontation. I'm like, wait, who is triggering the confrontation? This is the United States placing sanction against Chinese refineries. Like Bloomberg is posing this as that is a norm. That that's just what United States does. You just sanction everybody, and you should just accept it. But no, China says no. We're not going to accept that. It's a pretty big deal because a United States sanctioned Henli petrochemical group, which is one of the largest private independent refineries. This is not some small teapot refinery that fly under the radar. I understand why U.S. did it because the majority of the first you have to understand how U.S. sanction works. The U.S. sanction says they're going to sanction not just by the U.S. financial sanction against a company is they will prohibit any other business from doing that business with that company. If you do business with the sanctioned company and if you have any dealing in either U.S. dollars or you have business in United States, then that will place you, that will make you liable to be sanctioned by United States. So this is what. So what U.S. essentially is asking, it's asking all the Chinese businesses in China not to do business with the Chinese refinery. This is the extraterritoriality of the U.S. sanction. It's requiring companies in outside the United States to comply with its own laws. China have been up to this point humoring U.S. Let's remember, Chinese, even though China purchased 90% of Iranian oil, most of that purchase was, again, done by independent refineries. They're not done by Chinese state-backed companies. The Chinese, China has three major state-owned oil companies, but they mostly stayed away from purchasing Iranian crude because they have a lot of investment and interest overseas, and a lot of those businesses require U.S. dollars. So they don't want to get in trouble with the U.S. Treasury Department by purchasing Iranian oil themselves. That's why it's a smaller independent Chinese private refinery that's buying Iranian oil because 15% discount off the market price was good enough incentive for them. And most of the smaller independent refinery, they don't have overseas exposure. They sell mostly into the Chinese domestic market, so they thought they could take that risk. But Henli is different. Henli is one of the bigger independent companies, and they make up they make a pretty big part of the local economy in the city of Dalian. So China says no, you don't get to do this. It's not the Opium War era anymore, where you can come here and dictate to the Chinese what they can do on their own soil. So this time the Chinese government stepped in and says no Chinese companies will comply with U.S. sanction. We will not allow you to do that. You will continue to do business with Henli Group. We are banning you from complying with this U.S. sanction. Before Chinese government has never done that because before China has always been very careful not to trigger a confrontation with the United States. But now we're at the point where China says, you know what? Okay, gloves are off. Gloves are off. If you may force us, we're going to show you who is really the most powerful economy in the world. This happened during the tariff war, by the way. And now it's happening again. Now China will be more and more comfortable to do to United States what United States traditionally is doing to other countries. This is China had the dominance over the rare earth supply chain for decades. And China have not weaponized that until, Trump forced China's hand. China says, okay, you forced us to do this. Sorry, no more rare earth for your military industrial complex. And this is also why I think the latest sanction against the Chinese refinery is this is a typical Trump's hardball negotiation tactic, right? He talked about this in Art of Deal. I'll just raise my demand sky high, and then I'll force them to come to my terms. Trump is heading over to China in a week. I think that is going to happen. Before on the show, I said, hey, China hasn't confirmed the dates yet, but now we have seen multiple U.S. Air Force military transport planes fly into Beijing to offload equipment that's probably in preparation for Trump's visit. So I think the visit is going to happen. And Trump right now is just positioning himself for the hardball negotiation with Xi Jinping. Say, okay, maybe we can take off those sanctions on the U.S. refineries if you give us rare earth. But I don't think China will bite. And to make it even more ridiculous, right after Scott Bessent placed sanctions against the Chinese refinery, Scott Bessent today just says, we're asking China to help us unblock the Strait of Hormuz. It's like, look, if you're begging for help, at least you should know how to beg respectfully. Yeah, but Scott is. But instead, Scott Bessent says, "Oh, Iran has been the biggest sponsor of terrorism for last 47 years, and China, by purchasing 90% of Iranian oil, is a big sponsor of the Iranian terrorism." Well, I'm sorry, that's not how you beg for help. What did you want to do? You want to unblock what?
So that's not how you beg for help. Beg respectfully, buddy. That's not how you do it. Yeah, the U.S. is not, its knees are not accustomed, to the begging position. It has to be brought
They need to learn.
Yeah,
they need to learn how to perform kowtow.
Right. Right. I'm curious, what is the consequence? Like, does this extend to companies that, let's say, aren't U.S. companies, but are working in China? Like, meaning, how far does China's edict go? Is it just for Chinese companies, or is it for companies also?
No, any so this similar. This will be any companies that operate in China or have business in China. This is what happened with the Panama deal. The Hong Kong company Hutchinson Whampoa, owned by the Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing, had acquired the rights to operate two Panamanian ports on the either side of Panama Canal since 1997, since the 1990s, and the U.S. right wing neocons has been complaining this is China's have a strategic chokehold on United States. They've been crying about this for a long time until Trump took the decision to apply direct pressure on Panamanian government. So government of Panama, they cited some bogus national security concern, and they seized those two ports from the Hong Kong company before the Hong Kong company had signed the contract to operate this port for another 20 years. But the Panamanian government terminated the contract, seized the control of the ports, because they're doing the bidding of the United States. And China says, you know what? Any shipping companies that's any of these port logistic operators that looking to take over those two ports, we're gonna sanction your ass. Like your Panama, because Panama itself, it does just not have the capacity to operate the ports itself. So you will have to ask some other foreign operators to take over. But China already, warned other foreign ports operator, you know what? If you're going to take those two ports, we're going to sanction your ass. That means all your shipping, if you have any business with China, forget about it. You can forget about doing business in China. So think about it. Do you really want to take those two ports? So this is what Marco Rubio has been complaining about on his Twitter saying, the sovereignty of America hemisphere, of the Western hemisphere, is very important. We stand in solidarity with Panamanian government against coercion by the Chinese government. Well, I replied to him like, what are you gonna do, little man? What are you gonna do? This is, China is gonna show United States who really is the world's largest economy, who is really the most important and most powerful economy in the world. These knuckleheads in Washington needs to be made to understand. They really think that Scott Bessent said this during the tariff war. He said, well, China is a producer. We are the consumer. So we have the power over them. They depend on us to buy their goods. Well, apparently that's not the case. Chinese exports has been soaring. Chinese trade surplus is now like $1.5 trillion. Even after their trade with the United States has gone down, they just increased trade with the rest of the world. China does not need United States. But guess what? 80% of the antibiotics in U.S. is still produced in China. And U.S. military industrial complex can't even decouple from the Chinese supply chain because you don't make anything in the United States anymore. It's so pathetic. The U.S. Navy is now planning to build retrofit the warship in Korea and Japan. This is the U.S. is military industrial complex giving up on Made in America. Just because U.S. has just been so hollowed out. Even the military industrial complex give up, say, okay, let's just move to build warships in Japan and Korea where it's cheaper. Let's just offsource everything.
I'm one of those people that believe you don't supposed to outsource military stuff because you need an internal supply line just in case you actually go to war, let alone a supply line with a country that you're agitating against, as if you were going to war with them. It's amazing. And there's something else that's interesting. Trump is going to, wait, one more thing on this. I want to write this down. All right, one more thing on this. From the standpoint of China, why now? Like, why is it that they've decided to put their foot in the ground now? As you
Yeah,
pointed out, this
China
was something.
up to 2016, China has been trying to be accommodating to United States, right? Xi Jinping has said many times, the world is large enough for both US and China to coexist. But Washington don't believe that. Well, these guys believe in zero sum. Like you either are a bitch or they don't believe in equality, right? They do not believe equality. They don't believe in partnership. They only believe like the master slave relationship. China just had enough. Like, you know what? Like we wanted to work with you. We always hold our door open, but you are being a petulant child. What happened to petulant child? Petulant child gets spanked. It's time to spank the petulant child. Spank some sense. I fully believe in spanking. I mean, I have not spanked my child yet, but I agree with the principle of it.
Yeah.
I think the children should be disciplined. Right now, United States is like this toddler with a lot of still a lot of power that's wreaking havoc on the international stage. It needs to be brought in control, and China is, China didn't want to do this, but now it's really forced by United States to assert itself.
Yeah, a toddler with a razor blade. I think that's what I heard somebody describe it. A toddler with a razor blade. Or a toddler with a gun or something like that.
Yeah, that's more American.
Yeah,
toddler
more
with
American.
a gun.
right. It's not a prison fight. It's not with a ship. It's a toddler with a gun. So pursuant to that, with the sanctions, that China effectively said, look, we're going to back the Chinese companies. Don't mess with our companies. This is extra territorial provisions that the U.S. is trying to run. What about boats? I mean, does the same thing hold true for Iranian oil that's on tankers? Will China also back those tankers? And if so, how?
Now that's a more interesting question, because right now, United States blockade has mostly targeted Iranian-owned, Iranian flag tankers, or those so-called shadow fleet tankers that's unflagged or have expired ship registration, which under UNCLOS, the UN law of the sea, that any nation could seize a unflagged ship, even though United States never actually ratified UNCLOS. But anyway, right now, U.S. Navy is playing a cat and mouse game with the Iranian tankers coming out, because the Iranian tankers, what they do now, when they sail out of the Strait of Hormuz, they immediately hug the coastline of first Iran and then Pakistan and India. They stay within the territorial water of Pakistan, India, which is like 12 nautical miles from the coast. And because United States at this point, they don't want to so blatantly violating territorial water of Pakistan, India yet, they have like stayed off. So they wait until this Iranian tankers sail between the gap between India and Sri Lanka. There was an area of open water, like for Iranian tanker to exit India's territorial water before it enters into Sri Lankan territorial water, or after it leaves the Sri Lanka. There's a huge open sea between Sri Lanka and the Strait of Malacca, for example. That is where U.S. Navy is doing its interdiction. Now, I have been thinking about this. It's interesting because a lot of these Iranian tankers, their ultimate destination is South China Sea, because most of the Iranian oil is going to China anyway. And if you see the Iranian tankers that have made, they have made the trip before the American blockade, they would sail through the Strait of Malacca to the east side of the Strait of Malacca into the South China Sea, where they offload their oil into a different tanker, and those tankers then take those oil to China and market it under Malaysian oil. This is another way to get around the U.S. sanction. And this is why, if you look at the official data for Chinese import from 2024, Malaysia makes up 13% of China's oil imports, and in 2025 that was 11%. So, but Malaysia itself is an oil-producing country, but Malaysia doesn't produce that much oil. Most of the so-called Malaysian oil is actually rebranded Iranian oil or Venezuelan oil. And so that now the question is, why is U.S. doing this cat and mouse game in the Indian Ocean when they could have just blockaded the Strait of Malacca? It's a lot more efficient because Iranian tankers will have to come around Strait of Malacca anyway. And right. Strait of Malacca is the one choke point the U.S. Navy has been saying they want to block and choke off China's energy supply for decades, right? Why don't they do it there? Well, I thought about it. I think that my guess, this is just my educated guess, is because if U.S. Navy were to do a blockade on Strait of Malacca, that's going to cause widespread panic in the financial market all over the world. Because Strait of Malacca is used by everybody. In East Asia, there's Japan, Korea, Philippines, all the Southeast Asian nations. Even if U.S. Navy were just there to only intercept Iranian tankers, you will still send a shock through the stock market over the world. And that's the last thing Trump administration want to do, because they're very responsive to the stock to the stock movement, right? Stock market movement. So they don't want to crash the stock market yet. And this is why they don't want to do that. Another reason, I see very few people mention about this. China, they do not have power projection capability to Persian Gulf yet. They're building a lot of ships, they're building tons of ships, but they don't have the logistics supply base. The only logistic base they have currently is in Djibouti, but they don't have the kind of logistic base network and port agreement that United States have. Let's remember, before United States started the war against Iran, U.S. hammered out a deal with India, which allowed U.S. Navy ships to dock in India. All these ships, they need to be resupplied, refueled regularly, right? They can't just stay on open water indefinitely. They have to come in to get food, to get oil, and this is why you need these logistic bases everywhere. But China don't have those bases, because China military is not structured to be a imperial military the way the U.S. military is structured. So China military is not structured to be like expeditionary force where you send to far corner of the earth. Instead, the Chinese military is designed to fight on its peripheral, in its periphery, its neighborhood. And one of the important part is South China Sea. This is the area where China do have dominance over United States. China had built a lot of artificial island in South China Sea where they place missiles, including anti-ship ballistic missiles, so that allowed them to cover the whole range of South China Sea. And recently, U.S. Navy, they did a show of force with their vassal states like Philippines and Japan, etc. 11 ships to sail through South China Sea, and there were shadowed on both sides by a massive Chinese armada, and so United States cannot compete with China in South China Sea at the moment. That's another reason they wisely, I might add, decide not to put the blockade line on Strait of Malacca, because that could be challenged by Chinese military. So I don't know if I answer your question, but no. I'm just providing context here. Yeah.
No, it does make sense. Your point is the U.S. kept pushing the envelope. And in this particular case, China has built up its confidence, and it realized that you can't satisfy this toddler with a gun. Meaning there's nothing that you could do to satisfy the U.S. The U.S. is deal incapable. And on top of being deal incapable, it's dealing with, let's say, an equal power at this point, that China is feeling itself saying, hey, we're equals. You can't pull this shit anymore with us. No, I get it. It's like China's now at the point where it can do it. It couldn't do it 20 years ago. It can do it now. And that's what it's doing. What's also interesting to this is what does it mean for the world that China is now effectively saying, hey, this sanction regime that you guys have been running for 30 years, that's over with. We're no longer playing this game. What does it mean going forward from the standpoint of the world?
Right now the U.S. imperial system is under a lot of pressure on all fronts. First, the Iran war already demolished all the U.S. bases in the region. U.S. finally pulled out of Iraq, with the exception of Iraqi Kurdistan, after 20, 30 years, and then United States is it show it has no possible way to force open the Strait of Hormuz, right? And it does not call the shots in West Asia anymore militarily. It has shown to be a paper tiger by Iran. This war made propel Iran from a regional power to a world superpower. Because they dictate the flow of 20% of world supply of oil and gas. I just heard some data for countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar. They haven't sold any gas or oil for the last month. Okay. Right now, the only oil that's coming out of West Asia is through the pipeline across Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, and another smaller UAE pipeline. So total, there's about 4 million barrel per day that gets shipped from Red Sea, and the 1 billion barrel of oil per day on the UAE pipeline. So altogether, that's 5 million barrel of oil coming out of Persian Gulf. But before the war, it was 20 million barrel per oil was coming out. Wow. No, so like right now, nothing is coming through. Nothing is going through. This is placing a huge drag on the world economy. This is why the oil price finally shot up over $100. The Brent and the West Texas Intermediate finally has gone over, because even the last shipment of the oil from the Middle East just landed in California, in Long Beach. That tanker sailed before the war started, because there's a time delay, right? It takes 50 days to sail from Persian Gulf to the west coast of U.S. So now all the oil that sailed before the war started has arrived. The shortage will now begin. We have not seen anything yet. Because up to this point, we're still getting the oil that was coming in more than a month ago, that was already on the ocean. Now the real shortage will begin, and all thanks to Donald Trump. And I think, the idea, and I'm actually surprised Donald is going through his trip to China at this moment, because originally the idea was, by going after Venezuela and going after Iran, United States, Donald Trump will have some leverage when he meet with Xi Jinping and say, hey, we have those chokehold on your energy supply partners. How about give us some rare earth in exchange, right? We can do a trade. But now, what does he have? He has a very weak hand. And Xi Jinping could just say, no, still no rare earth for you. Then what he's going to do. And this is why they're doing all these sanctioning Chinese oil refinery, and Scott Bessent is threatening to place secondary sanction on Chinese banks. That is going to collapse the world financial system if he start doing that, because the Chinese bank is not like the Chinese bank of 20 years ago. They are very much embedded into the global trade network now. If you place secondary sanction on Chinese bank, again, that's going to collapse the stock market, global stock market, and driven the world economy into not just a recession but a depression.
Yeah, is the point. Well, you've said a few things that are spot on. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was in the hospital yesterday, so I was getting this stuff in bits and pieces. But Iran just attacked that UAE pipeline. So, from my understanding, there was one pipeline that the UAE had at its disposal to get around Iran's
the Strait of Hormuz
tax on the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah,
and Iran just attacked that pipeline yesterday. I think it fired like drones and hit it.
Yeah, Fajira.
Mission.
Yeah. So the UAE pipeline goes to the port of Fajira, where they get loaded onto ships on the Gulf of Oman, and then so Iran's like, okay, we're just gonna attack your ports. Still no oil is gonna come out. UAE, they received the brunt of Iranian attack throughout this war, so Iran really have it in for them, because UAE was also very strident of saying, like, okay, we want Washington to take out Iran. We really want Washington to take out Iran. So Iran's like, oh, really? Okay, we'll make an example out of you. And so that means we're down to the Saudi pipeline now, which is, again, only 4 million barrels per oil. And that can be choked off anytime if Houthis or Ansar Sarah decide to join in the action, to close down the Bab al-Mandeb on the Red Sea, and then there will be no oil. And so far, I think Iran and Saudi Arabia probably has some kind of understanding. They're allowing that 4 million barrel per day to go through. So it still doesn't matter. You used to be 20 million barrels per day that was coming out of Persian Gulf. We're still like 16 million barrels short. I mean and the people are thinking, oh, but U.S. have oil. No, U.S. don't have oil. U.S. is a net oil importer. United States imports 6 million barrels of crude per day. 6 million barrels of crude per day. And what United States export is that U.S. is a net petroleum product export, because U.S. export a lot of natural gas, and U.S. export a lot of what's called petroleum liquids, but they're basically gas, like a liquefied gas, and that they're not replacement for oil. And right now, U.S. economy is actually a very oil intensive economy. It's 40% more dependent on oil than the Chinese economy, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, because everything is made in China nowadays. Yet somehow U.S. economy is still 40% more oil intensive than the Chinese economy, because all the transportation infrastructure in U.S. still relies on oil, whereas China, China really did a major push for electrification. They electrify their train lines. They have EVs. They have a huge now more than 60% of the new cars sold in China are all EVs. So China is well prepared for this, much more prepared than United States. And then there's the fertilizers. The fertilizers, which is crazy, because a lot of the fertilizer actually is synthesized out of natural gas. Urea, nitrogen, potassium. The nitrogen is uses natural gas to get it to extract the nitrogen. U.S. is a huge natural gas producer, yet the price fertilizer is still going up. Now the farmer bankruptcy in the United States is up 45%, because farmers can no longer afford the increase in the fertilizer prices and the diesel prices. And this is because even though U.S. is a large gas producer, but guess what? Natural gas, oil, those are globally traded commodities. So U.S. companies, big oil majors, are making a lot of money head and over heels right now, exporting those excessive gas to the rest of the world, because they can make higher profit, which make the price go up. This is why the U.S. farmers now can no longer afford to to buy fertilizers that depend on natural gas. So and anyway, even if they do plant soybeans, they can't sell to China anyway, so it doesn't matter. They're screwed. Trump is
Well,
literally killing off his base.
right here, 70% of farmers can't afford to grow all their crops. Ain't that
Yeah.
something? Ain't that something?
We're gonna have food shortages, sir. We're gonna have food shortages at end of the year. I mean, it's guaranteed now. Like we are really late now into the spring planting season. This is a time for the farmers to put down their crop for the rest of the year, and right now it ain't happening. I don't think that they're not getting the fertilizers. That means there's going to be a major crop shortage at the end of the year. It's coming.
Yeah. And that's the wild part, right? About one of the things that the war in Ukraine taught me was that there is a difference between commodities and between cash. You can't eat cash. You can eat commodities, right? So even if the US turns to the farmers, which it did before, and say, hey, we will pay you in lieu of the sanctions because we realize you're being hurt, that doesn't really affect their ability to produce food, which is the point. Like it misses the point. Yeah, we can make you whole financially, but making you whole financially is not the same thing as you having what you need in order to produce crops so people can eat. Those are very different things. And your point is all of this is coming to a head. One of the other things I wanted to hit was leverage. And you alluded to this. So it's one thing for the Trump administration to go to China and says, hey, we crippled Venezuela. We've put Maduro in jail. Look at how provocative we are in murdering people in boats. We've attacked Iran, and we are limiting the oil shipments coming from Iran because we've effectively collapsed the government of Iran. And now we have it either in a patsy or at the very least, the government is in chaos. And now we're coming to China saying, look how provocative we are. Look at what we're willing to do. Look at the leverage we have at our disposal. That's not this. This is you're coming to China after losing a war with a regional power that you have
and on top of that, China's huge oil reserve, which is the world's largest. China has about 1.5 billion barrels of oil. That's larger than United States, Japan, Europe combined. Right? Yeah. This is the world's largest oil reserve, which China took a couple of years to build up. And that hasn't gone down. China hasn't been drawing down on their oil inventory for more than a month of war has already gone by. That inventory is growing because right now there's more oil coming in, from Iranian oil, Russian oil are still flowing into China. So China is doing okay. Recently, China, when the war first happened, China put a export ban on gasoline, diesel, fertilizers, because they wanted to make sure their domestic producers get them first. Right. But now China just lifted they say they're going to lift the export ban on gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. That's not a country that's running out of oil because now China is resuming export. And China is one of the major export of the petroleum product to the rest of the Asia because China has a lot of refineries. They have a lot of refining capacities. So traditionally, China supply about 32% of the jet fuel to Australia. And now they say, okay, you can buy. We have plenty of oil. You can buy gas. You can buy gasoline. You can buy diesel. You can buy. I don't know about fertilizers. I don't know if China is lifting the ban on fertilizer export yet. But yeah. for gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, this is a huge relief for people in Southeast Asia because farmers, they need diesel. They need diesel to work their tractors. Yes, China is probably going to be least impacted by the shortage.
I'm curious, from your point of view, where do you think this goes? I mean, he's going to a meeting. He has no cards in that meeting, or very few cards. The war that he involved himself in with the regional power has been lost, or at the very least is about to heat up once again, meaning it seems that this push, this freedom push, or whatever the hell Trump is calling it, through the Strait of Hormuz, and this is going to heat this war up. The U.S. I mean, they've already fired on U.S. ships, apparently, in the recent reports. So they hit U.S. ships. From the
and the U.S. ship ran, and U.S. ship ran away. They hit the U.S. The firing a U.S. warship, and which warship ran away. And this is why, Jamar, in America, we don't call Iran. We say Iran. This is why American says Iran.
Iran. Like, this is why we call it Iran, because we haul ass when they fired us. Oh, that's hilarious. That is hilarious. A military that is built to project power around the world just hauled ass when Iran fired us. Put that in context. Not to mention the USS Ford limping back to America, like just was crawling his way back to America. That's why we call it Iran. When he goes to China, meaning, what is the point of agitating against China when you've just been found out by Iran? I am very interested in whatever that conversation looks like. And I guess this could be the last question. What, given the world events, what do you think this looks like? I mean, the reality of it is, as you point out, China is like, dude, we're not paying attention to your sanctions now. So you trying to come in with some kind of leverage by putting sanctions on our companies, that's not going to fly. You've just lost the war. What is this conversation between Trump and Xi Jinping going to be about? Trump has no cards. Xi Jinping knows it.
I'm interested in finding out too. But usually, you have to keep in mind, Jamar. Usually, these meetings, the summit, are just for all photo ops. The real negotiation has already been done among the bureaucrats on both sides. The leaders, they just show up, shoot some photos, and then for Trump to come home and claim we achieve a great deal. I have great personal chemistry with President Xi Jinping. We had a great talk. We reached an agreement, and the stock market will rally. Then Barron will make a killing again at stock futures. And then realistically, I think that's what's going to happen, because for Trump, what he needs, he just need a Photoshop op. He just needs something for him to claim victory at this point. But he's a reality TV show host, Jamar. He knows how to play it up for television, and it's not grounded in reality, but he knows how to project his reality. And he's now gonna say he's a great peacemaker and ask for a Nobel Peace Prize again. And I think that's gonna happen. But I'm curious to know what kind of deal was hammered out by the other bureaucrats. Behind the scenes, because obviously there has to be some kind of agreement for this meeting to even go forward, because otherwise, like you say, what's the point? What's the point of meeting if you can't agree on anything? You can't produce anything tangible. But I think for Trump, personally, he just needs something to show that he's doing something, and then that which he can trumpet to be a victory for himself, as he always does.
Yeah, but I mean, he's in the middle. I mean, okay. He is going to China in the middle of a hot war. The war hasn't gone anywhere. And the fact that these two sides are rubbing against each other militarily again, meaning the ceasefire hasn't gone anywhere. The U.S. is agreement incapable with a country that it doesn't consider an equal. I hope that makes sense. Like, you have an imperial power that is against a rival, that is a regional power, that the U.S. is supposed to just walk over, and it can't do it.
Because you know why, Jamar? Because they haven't felt the real pain yet.
Exactly.
They haven't felt the real pain yet. I think you will take time for reality to sink in. Like I mentioned, the last ship sailed from Persian Gulf just before the war, just arrived in Long Beach, California, just a few days ago, and the real shortage is just about to begin. So the real pain hasn't really started yet, and I think it's gonna to take another month of this. Things might be different. when the shit really hits the fan. Well, I mean, the real shit will hit the fan if this thing doesn't resolve anytime soon, and then we have food shortages at the end of the year. That's when like things gonna get real serious. I mean, we're not looking into a possible recession right now. We're looking into a possibility of a depression with a D. I'm not just being like, just not being creating hyperbole or anything. This is pretty real.
It's a big deal. I mean, if you listen to I don't think Americans realize this yet. Like this, for whatever reason, markets haven't priced this in. Like meaning they're still thinking taco. Trump always chickens out. And I think what they seem to be missing, at least when I was going through some of the analysis of it, is that this is not a tariff. This is not like, okay, I can just turn this off. You're in the middle of a war.
You can. Yeah. The thing is, even if they reach agreement today to stop this, to lift the blockade, you will take month and month to restore production to the pre-war level. Because with this oil and gas infrastructure, it's not a knob you can just turn it on and off, because they require to maintain constant pressure at the oil well. When you stop production, guess what happened? The pressure builds and builds and builds, and eventually you blow up your equipment, and it damages your well. And what's going to happen is you're going to have to. You can't use the old drilling hole anymore. You're going to have to make new drilling, and which takes time, which takes a lot more investment, a lot more time. So even if we have, Kuwait is an example. The Saddam invasion of Kuwait happened back in the 1990s, and they still have not reached the production level pre-war. Kuwait still have not reached their pre-war production level of the 1990s. Think about that. I mean, like that's kind of the long-term damage it's going to do to the oil infrastructure in the region.
And by the way, that's assuming it stops today. And it's not
big if.
And by the way, that's assuming that if it starts back up, Iran doesn't smash UAE, Saudi Arabia, their oil production capabilities, where that stuff needs to be rebuilt, which means in the future, right? Like meaning it's one thing if you resume it. Okay, I get that. It's another thing that's not there to resume, which is possible in another, let's say, back and forth between the U.S. and Iran. No, you're right. They haven't priced this stuff in. People haven't gone hungry yet. Fuel hasn't gone to $10, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
But things already start moving. There's already capital flight from West Asia. All that Dubai money, they're already coming into Southeast Asia and to China right now, because people are realizing that the whole Dubai project might not be sustainable at this point. They have to park their money in a safe haven somewhere else. So there's a lot of you say follow the money, right? Right now, the money is going to Asia. The money is going to East Asia, Southeast Asia, and then they might never return. Back to the West Asia. And the whole AI bubble in United States, they were counting on investment from those oil sheiks in the Gulf, right? Like the $500 billion Stargate project that was supposed to be financed by Gulf money. I don't think they will have that money for a Sam Altman anymore. I'm sorry. That's another thing that's gonna blow up, because if you take away all the AI investment, the U.S. economy is in recession already. And I think that AI bubble is going to be is about to burst.
Yes, I mean, it's not just the AI bubble. I mean, if you think of the amount of money, and this will be the last thing I promise, the amount of money that those Gulf states dump into the U.S. and this idea of protection for oil. I mean, if you think of the airplane that they gave Donald Trump, the money that they were giving Donald Trump was like, they're going to give us $1 trillion or whatever the hell that number is, right? How are they going to do that when, as you point out, the UAE has sent no oil anywhere? Like Kuwait, no oil. Like many of these countries have been fundamentally crippled by this. And in crippling the countries, you've crippled the investment that is going into the US, especially when they realize we are not protected. The military personnel ran from their military bases. Again, Iran. They ran from their military bases into hotels. like ships ran. Military.
Iran did the Top Gun Maverick thing of bombing a U.S. bases with a 60-year-old airframe with an F5. You know,
F5. What the hell, right? It's like we have this sophisticated air defense around the bases, and a Cold War area plane bombed a U.S. base and flew back to get home.
The Hollywood version of Top Gun is Tom Cruise, but in real life, the Top Gun Maverick is actually Persian.
Yeah, a guy with a beard in a plane, you know, with a sticker on the side of it. Yeah, right. That's the real Top Gun. Carl, man, I always enjoy these conversations. The audience loves you to bits. I think you're fantastic, and I always appreciate you joining me, man. I really do. Just for the audience, just so they know where to find you. Carl Jha. Carl Jha is host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. Definitely check out Carl's channel. Also, you can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk, the letter N. Subscribe and support this podcast at patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl has a series where he goes through Chinese culture, or at the very least the history of China, year by year, or I think you said every 5-year increment.
No. So I'm back to year by year now. Like the last time I talked to you, I was covering the Warring States period where the primary source just not there to do year by year. But now I just reached the imperial age. I'm now covering the year 219 BC. We're in the time of the first emperor. So start from imperial age, we have the annals now. We have the imperial annals. I can again go year by year. So now I'm doing again year by year of Chinese history.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so impressed by that. And you have content forever. That's the other thing, right? It's like, I have content forever. My man, Carl, you be safe. You have a good rest of your night. And thank you for this, man. Have a good one, man.
Anytime, Jamar.
Bye-bye. Shout out to Carl Jha. Love talking to Carl Jha. My mom is like, you got to be cutting up. Yeah, I enjoy talking to him.